Clara Lawrence walked through the city streets, her heels clicking against the wet pavement. Rain fell lightly, creating small puddles that reflected the city lights like tiny stars. She pulled her expensive coat tighter around herself, trying to shield from the cold drizzle. On the surface, Clara had everything a person could want: wealth, influence, and a life most could only dream of. But deep inside, she felt a quiet emptiness, a loneliness she could not shake. No business deal, no luxurious car, no fancy party had ever filled the space inside her heart. As she passed through a small park, something unusual caught her eye. A little girl no older than 10 or 11 sat alone on a worn wooden bench. Her hair was tied back with a faded ribbon, and she had a notebook open on her lap. She wasn't looking at the raindrops or the passers-by. She seemed elsewhere, as if listening to a world only she could hear. Clara paused, intrigued. There was a calmness about the girl, something that made the air around her feel lighter, softer. Clara's curiosity overpowered her hesitation. She stepped closer. "Hi there," she said gently, careful not to startle the girl. "What are you writing?" The girl looked up with eyes that seemed to see without seeing. They were soft, bright, and strangely piercing. "It's a letter," she said simply, "for someone I hope will read it." Clara smiled politely, but something inside her tightened. She had expected the usual casual park encounters, maybe a stray dog, a jogger asking for directions, or a lost tourist. But this was different. There was a quiet honesty in the girl's voice that made Clara stop in her tracks. "Can I see it?" Clara asked, her curiosity now mixed with a strange sense of caution. The girl nodded, carefully holding out the notebook. "Can you read this?" she asked, her small fingers tracing the raised dots on the page. Clara's eyes widened. The notebook was filled with Braille. She had never learned to read it. I'm not sure," Clara admitted, feeling embarrassed. The girl tilted her head slightly, as if considering this. "That's okay," she said softly. "Maybe you can help me find someone who can. Or maybe you can just sit and listen. I can read it to you." There was no shame in her voice, no complaint, just an innocent hope that someone might care enough to hear her words. Clara felt her throat tighten. She nodded, sitting down on the bench beside her. "I'd like that," she said. The girl's small fingers danced across the page, then she began reading. Her voice was quiet yet full of strength. At first, Clara listened with polite attention, but soon she was drawn into the words. The letter spoke of dreams and small joys, of struggles that Clara had never imagined. Every line carried honesty, every sentence a tiny spark of hope. The girl's words were simple, but they pierced Clara's heart like nothing else ever had. The rain continued to fall, but Clara hardly noticed. The sounds of the city faded as she listened. The girl wrote about her life, about the difficulties she faced every day simply because she could not see. She wrote about her dreams of learning, of understanding the world through stories, of small kindnesses that made life beautiful. And through it all, she smiled, she hoped, and she never once sounded bitter. Clara felt a lump in her throat. Here was a child, facing a world full of challenges yet full of courage and hope. And here she was, a woman with every material comfort, realizing she had never truly felt what it meant to be grateful, to be human, to connect. When the girl finished reading, she looked up with wide, innocent eyes. "So do you like it?" she asked softly. Clara could not speak immediately. Her heart pounded, her eyes blurred with unshed tears. She nodded slowly. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "More beautiful than anything I've ever read." The little girl smiled, unaware of the storm she had stirred in Clara's heart. And in that moment, beneath the gentle rain and the city lights, something inside Clara shifted. She didn't know why, but she knew one thing for certain. This small blind girl with her simple letter had already changed her life. The girl's name was Emma. Clara learned this as she handed back the notebook and watched the small fingers brush over the worn cover. Emma's hands were gentle but firm, and there was a quiet confidence in the way she carried herself, even though her world was filled with shadows she could never see. "Can I read a little more?" Clara asked, surprising herself. She had never asked for anything like this in her life. People often wanted her attention, her money, or her advice, but no one had ever offered her a piece of their soul in words. Emma smiled, her face lighting up as she adjusted the notebook in her lap. "I'd like that," Emma said. She began reading, slowly at first, then with growing confidence. Her words painted pictures Clara had never imagined. Emma wrote about her mornings waking up in a small apartment with the sun spilling softly through a thin curtain. She wrote about the smell of her grandmother's cooking, the sound of the city outside, the feel of a cool breeze on her face, and the warmth of a small cat that slept by her feet. Every detail, simple as it seemed, carried love, hope, and a vividness Clara had never noticed in her own luxurious world. Clara listened quietly, captivated. Emma's voice was steady, calm, but full of emotion. She wrote about her struggles, too, about the challenges of being blind, of learning to navigate a world designed for sight, about moments when she wished someone would just hold her hand or understand her fear. Clara's chest tightened. She had never thought of such things. She had never thought about how much courage it must take to face the world without sight, to trust in others when every step could feel uncertain. Emma's words were honest, never bitter, never asking for pity. She wrote about her dreams of learning to read more books, of visiting places she could only imagine, of listening to the music of faraway cities, and of telling stories to people who might never understand the depth of her world. She wrote about kindness, about moments when strangers smiled at her or when someone offered a helping hand, and she wrote about hope, a hope so strong it seemed to wrap around Clara's heart like a warm blanket. Clara was moved in a way she had never been moved before. Tears blurred her vision, and she held the notebook close, afraid to break the spell of Emma's words. She realized that in all her life of wealth and success, she had never known this feeling, this quiet, deep connection to another human being's soul. As Emma read the last few lines, she paused and looked at Clara, her expression innocent yet knowing. "That's it," she said softly. "That's all I wrote for now." Clara swallowed hard, trying to find the words. "Emma, your words. They're incredible. I don't think I've ever felt this before. You make the world feel alive." Emma tilted her head and smiled shyly. "Really? You think so?" "Yes," Clara whispered, her voice trembling. "More than anything I've ever seen or owned." For a long moment the rain pattered around them, and the city moved on without noticing. Clara realized she had been missing something her entire life. Wealth, fame, power. They had never taught her what it felt like to care, to truly feel, to connect with someone on the deepest level. And here was a blind little girl with nothing but words, teaching her more about life than any school, any business, or any luxury ever could. "I want to help you." "Emma," Clara said suddenly, almost afraid to speak the words aloud. "Can I visit you tomorrow? Maybe bring some books, some things that can help you?" Emma's face lit up. You would do that?" "Yes," Clara said firmly. "I want to see how I can help. I want to be here for you." Emma's smile widened, her eyes sparkling with a light Clara had never seen before. In that moment, beneath the gray sky and soft drizzle, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years, a true sense of purpose, a connection that went beyond money or status. She had no idea that this small blind girl, with a notebook and a letter, was about to change her life forever. The next day, Clara arrived at Emma's small apartment, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. She had never entered a place so modest, so unlike her own luxurious world. The walls were faded, the furniture simple, and the air smelled faintly of old books and home-cooked food. But as soon as Emma's grandmother greeted her with a warm, tired smile, Clara felt something she had never felt in her penthouse or at her office. She felt welcome. Emma guided Clara inside with confidence, holding her hand lightly. Clara noticed the little things that made life so challenging for the girl. Stacks of Braille books on the table, a small cane resting against the wall, and a worn backpack filled with notebooks and pencils. Every object seemed to tell a story of determination, of surviving in a world not built for her. Clara's heart ached as she realized how much Emma had to work just to experience life in her own way. "You came," Emma said softly, her voice bright despite the hardships Clara could sense in it. "I promised," Clara replied, smiling, "and I want to keep that promise." For hours they sat together. Emma read another letter she had written, describing her days at the small school she attended and the challenges she faced there. She spoke of navigating crowded hallways, of learning to read and write in Braille, and of the moments when classmates laughed at her struggles. But Emma's voice never carried bitterness, only honesty and quiet courage. Clara listened, astonished by the resilience of this little girl. She had never imagined what it meant to live without sight, to rely entirely on memory, touch, and sound to make sense of the world. Every word Emma spoke painted a vivid picture in Clara's mind. The careful steps she had to take to avoid obstacles, the sound of her grandmother calling from another room, the rhythm of her own heartbeat as she learned new things. Emma paused, her fingers resting on the notebook. Sometimes it's really hard, she admitted softly. I get scared that I'll never be able to do everything I want. But then I remember there are people who care, and that makes it easier. Clara's eyes filled with tears. She realized that despite all her wealth, she had never faced a struggle like this. She had never known fear the way Emma did, or hope so pure and unwavering. Here was a child, living in a small, cramped apartment, facing every challenge with courage, optimism, and a heart bigger than most adults. And she was teaching Clara lessons no money could buy. I want to help you, Emma, Clara said softly, taking the girl's hand. I want to make things easier for you. I want you to have the opportunities you deserve. Emma's face lit up, a smile breaking across her features. You really mean that? Yes, Clara said, her voice trembling. I want to help you read more books, learn more, and follow your dreams. You deserve that. Emma's fingers brushed Clara's hand in gratitude, a simple touch that spoke volumes. Clara felt a warmth spreading through her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't about money or power or luxury. It was about connection, about caring, about being human. Over the next hour, Clara watched Emma move through her small apartment with ease, guided by memory and confidence. She observed the tiny victories in her daily life, the way she found her way to the kitchen, how she used her hands to organize her books, and the pride she felt when she read aloud flawlessly. Clara felt a mixture of awe and humility. This child, who faced so many limitations, had more courage than most adults she knew. When it was time to leave, Clara knelt and hugged Emma tightly. You're incredible, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Never forget that. Emma hugged back without hesitation, sensing the sincerity in Clara's words. I won't, she said softly. And thank you for caring. As Clara stepped back into the cold city streets, she felt a change inside her. She had entered Emma's world as a stranger, curious but distant. Now she carried a piece of that world with her, a world filled with courage, hope, and love despite struggles that Clara had never known. And deep down, she knew this was only the beginning of a journey that would change both of their lives forever. In the days that followed, Clara found herself thinking about Emma constantly. She remembered the small blind girl's soft voice, the courage in her words, and the way her eyes seemed to shine even without sight. Clara realized that something inside her had shifted. The emptiness she had carried for years now felt like it could be filled, not with money or luxury, but with something far more meaningful: connection. The next afternoon, Clara returned to Emma's apartment, carrying a small bag filled with supplies she had carefully chosen: Braille books, notebooks, pencils, and even a few audio recordings of children's stories. She knocked gently on the door, unsure if Emma would be at home. Emma's voice answered almost immediately. Clara, you came! Yes, Clara said, smiling. I promised, didn't I? Emma led her inside, and Clara noticed the way the girl's face lit up with joy at the sight of the small gifts. It was a simple happiness, the kind that could not be bought. Emma ran her fingers over the Braille books, feeling the raised dots with careful curiosity. You thought of me, she whispered, her voice full of awe. Clara nodded, feeling tears prick at her eyes. Of course I did, she said softly. I want you to have everything you need to learn and dream. For hours they sat together. Clara watched Emma navigate her small apartment with skill and grace. She noticed the tiny victories in the girl's daily life, finding her way to the kitchen, organizing her books, and reading aloud with perfect clarity. Every small act was a triumph, and Clara felt a deep respect for the child who faced the world so bravely. Emma then took Clara's hand and guided it to the notebook. I wrote something for you, she said. Her voice trembled slightly, as if she were afraid Clara wouldn't understand the depth of her feelings. It's not long, but I hope it shows how much you mean to me. Clara accepted the notebook gently, her hands brushing against Emma's. She began to read as Emma spoke the words aloud. The letter was simple, but it carried a weight that made Clara's heart ache. Emma wrote about hope, about trust, and about the importance of kindness. She wrote about the warmth she felt in Clara's presence, the comfort of someone truly seeing her for who she was. and the joy that came from feeling cared for. Clara felt tears slipping down her cheeks. She had never been moved like this before. No business deal, no luxurious gift. No moment of public praise had ever touched her soul in this way. Here was a child, living in a world of limitations, teaching her the greatest lesson she had ever known, the power of genuine human connection. Emma looked at her with innocent eyes. "Do you like it?" she asked softly, sensing the emotion in Clara. Clara choked back a sob. "It's perfect," she whispered. "More than perfect. You've taught me something I didn't even know I needed to learn." For a long moment they sat in silence, listening to the rain tapping against the window. Clara realized that she had never spent time like this before, without distraction, without worry, without pretense. Just two hearts connecting, sharing a moment that would stay with them forever. "Clara," Emma said suddenly, breaking the quiet, "do you think maybe you can help me see the world through stories, through words? I want to know everything I can, even if I can't see it." Clara's heart swelled with emotion. She nodded, brushing a stray tear from her cheek. "Yes, Emma," she said firmly. "I will help you, and together we'll explore the world in every way we can. You will never feel alone." Emma's smile was radiant, a light that seemed to fill the small apartment. Clara knew in that instant that their connection was no longer just a meeting between two strangers. It was a bond, a promise, a shared journey of hope, courage, and love. And as Clara walked back into the gray, wet streets of the city that evening, she felt a warmth inside her chest she had never known before, a certainty that life had given her a gift far greater than money, power, or luxury. Emma had shown her the meaning of true connection, and Clara knew that nothing in the world could ever take it away. Over the next few weeks, Clara became a steady presence in Emma's life. Every afternoon she visited the small apartment, carrying books, pencils, and even little surprises, a warm scarf, a notebook with fresh Braille pages, a storybook she had carefully transcribed herself. Each gift was simple, yet it brought a brightness to Emma's face that Clara had never seen before. The girls' laughter, soft and melodic, filled the small rooms, replacing the silence and struggle that had always lived there. Clara watched Emma navigate her world with incredible determination. Every movement, every action was deliberate. She could feel the girl's triumph in the smallest moments. When Emma found a pencil under the table, when she read a sentence perfectly aloud, or when she correctly counted the number of steps to the kitchen without hesitation, Clara realized that life for Emma was a series of victories, small but powerful, fought every single day. And in each of these moments, Clara felt a deep, unshakable admiration for the child. One rainy afternoon, Clara arrived with a new Braille book she had specially ordered. Emma's eyes lit up as she felt the raised dots with trembling fingers. You thought of me again?" Emma whispered, her voice full of awe. "I did," Clara said, smiling softly. "I wanted to give you something you could enjoy on your own. Something that would open doors to new stories and worlds." Emma hugged the book close, and Clara noticed the way the girl's chest rose and fell with quiet excitement. "Thank you," she said simply. "I don't think anyone has ever given me something like this before." Clara's heart ached with emotion. She realized that in her own life of luxury, she had often taken things for granted: books, knowledge, comfort, and attention. But here was a little girl, whose world was small in space but vast in courage, treasuring every single gesture. During these visits, Clara also helped Emma practice reading aloud, learning new words, and even exploring the city in small guided walks. She taught her how to navigate the streets safely, how to listen for subtle sounds in the environment, and how to trust her instincts. Each step outside the apartment was a shared adventure, full of discovery and quiet triumphs. One afternoon, Emma handed Clara another letter, carefully written in Braille. "I wrote this for you," she said softly, her fingers brushing Clara's hand as she passed the notebook. Clara read it slowly, her chest tightening with every word. Emma's letter thanked her, yes, but it also spoke of love, trust, and the joy of being seen for who she truly was. It expressed the child's hopes, her gratitude, and the way Clara's presence had given her confidence to face the world. Clara could hardly keep herself from crying as she finished the final line. "You've changed my life," Emma whispered, almost shyly. "And I hope I've made a difference in yours too." Clara blinked back tears, unable to speak at first. "Emma, she finally said. "You've reminded me what it means to care, to feel, and to connect. You've taught me more than I ever could have imagined." The two of them sat in silence for a few moments, listening to the soft patter of rain outside the window. Clara realized that this bond, this simple act of showing kindness and sharing time, had transformed her in ways money never could. She felt a warmth in her heart, a sense of purpose she had never known. From that day forward, Clara was determined to do more. She arranged tutoring for Emma, brought her new learning materials, and even helped her grandmother organize the apartment so that Emma could move freely and safely. Each act, no matter how small, brought smiles, laughter, and courage into Emma's life, and in return, Clara found herself changing, becoming softer, more compassionate, and more alive than she had ever been. Through small acts of kindness, a connection had blossomed between the wealthy woman and the blind girl, a connection that would grow into a bond neither time nor circumstance could ever break. Weeks passed and Clara's life slowly began to change. She spent her mornings in board meetings, her afternoons with Emma, and her evenings reflecting on the small lessons the little girl had taught her. But balancing these two worlds was not easy. Clara's business demanded her attention. Deadlines loomed, important decisions waited, and her social circle, friends and colleagues, began to question her priorities. They did not understand why she spent so much time with a blind child from a modest apartment. One evening, Clara arrived at Emma's apartment, exhausted from a long day of meetings. She found the girl struggling to open a jar of jam, her small hands twisting and pressing but unable to get the lid off. Normally, Clara would have knelt immediately to help. But tonight, fatigue weighed her down. A sharp edge of frustration cut through her heart. "Emma," Clara exclaimed, her voice sharper than she intended. "Why didn't you wait? Why didn't you ask for help sooner?" Emma froze, her hands dropping to her lap. I was trying," she whispered softly. Her voice, always so brave and confident, now trembled. Clara's chest tightened as guilt surged through her, but she couldn't stop herself. "I can't do everything. I have my own life, my own responsibilities. You need to understand that," she shouted, the words harsher than she wanted them to be. Emma's eyes, filled with innocence and trust, met Clara's. She didn't cry or yell back. She simply said, "It's okay. You don't have to. You just have to be here." Sometimes, Clara felt her anger crumble instantly, replaced by a heavy wave of shame. How could she have snapped at this little girl, who had faced more challenges in 10 years than most people faced in a lifetime? How could she have forgotten the lessons Emma had taught her about patience, hope, and courage? She knelt beside Emma, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I'm so sorry, Emma," Clara whispered, her voice breaking. "I shouldn't have shouted. You're right. I only need to be here with you. That's what matters most." Emma leaned into her, her small hands holding Clara's. "It's okay," she said again, softly. "I know you care. I always knew." The room fell silent except for the sound of the rain tapping against the window. Clara realized that the world outside, the business deals, the meetings, the pressures of wealth, was nothing compared to the life she shared with Emma. Here was a bond built on trust, kindness, and love, not money or status. And she had almost let it slip away in a moment of frustration. "I promise," Clara said finally, hugging Emma tightly. "I will be here, no matter what. You will never be alone." Emma smiled faintly against her shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. That night, as Clara walked back through the quiet, rainy streets of the city, she reflected on her moment of weakness. She had been tested and she had almost failed. But more importantly, she had learned that love and connection were not always easy. They required patience, humility, and constant effort. Clara understood that helping Emma was not just about providing books or tutoring. It was about being present, truly present, even when life became overwhelming. And she vowed that from now on, she would never let frustration or fatigue cloud the bond they had built. For Emma, life remained a daily struggle filled with small victories. But for Clara, the experience had become a mirror reflecting her own humanity back at her. The blind girl had shown her that real strength was not measured in wealth or power. It was measured in courage, love, and the willingness to care even when it was difficult. And as Clara looked up at the rain-soaked city, she felt a sense of clarity she had never known before. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside her heart, a storm of guilt, reflection, and ultimately growth. Emma had tested her, and in the process Clara had learned what it truly meant to be human. From that night forward, their bond was no longer just a connection of friendship, it was a lifeline, a promise and a testament to the power of compassion. Months passed, and Emma's world began to change in ways she had only dreamed of. With Clara's support, she attended a new school equipped for blind students, with braille books, helpful teachers, and technology that made learning easier. Each day Emma faced challenges, but she did so with courage and determination. Clara watched her from the sidelines, proud and humbled, realizing that this little girl was stronger than anyone she had ever known. On the day of Emma's first school presentation, Clara arrived early, her heart racing with anticipation. She had seen Emma grow from a small, timid girl struggling with life's simplest tasks into a confident child who could read aloud, navigate the world, and express herself with clarity and joy. Clara felt tears welling up as she thought about how far Emma had come, and how much she herself had changed along the way. The classroom was filled with students and teachers, all eager to listen. Emma stood confidently at the front, her braille notebook in hand. She spoke clearly, her voice steady and full of life. She shared a story she had written herself about hope, courage, and the beauty of small victories. Clara's eyes filled with tears as she listened, recognizing the depth of Emma's heart in every word. After the presentation, Emma handed Clara a small folded letter. "I wrote this for you," she said softly. Her fingers brushed Clara's as she passed it over, a silent connection that spoke louder than any words. Clara opened the letter and began to read. Emma's handwriting, simple yet precise in braille, conveyed her feelings with honesty and love. She thanked Clara for everything, her time, her care, her belief in her. But more than that, she wrote about the lessons Clara had taught her, the importance of trust, the warmth of human connection, and the power of love that could be felt even without sight. Clara's tears fell freely as she finished the letter. She clutched it to her chest, overwhelmed by emotion. Here was a child who could not see the world with her eyes, teaching Clara to truly see, with her heart. For all the wealth, influence, and luxury Clara had known, nothing compared to the gift Emma had given her, the understanding that life's greatest riches come from love, compassion, and genuine connection. Emma looked at her with a small, proud smile. "You changed my life," she whispered. "And you helped me see the world even though I'm blind. Thank you for reading me." Clara knelt and embraced her tightly. "No, Emma," she whispered through her tears. "You changed my life. You taught me to care, to feel, and to be truly human. I will never forget you." For a long moment they stayed in that embrace, the noise of the city outside fading into nothing. Clara realized that this bond, born from a simple letter and a moment of courage, was more valuable than anything she had ever known. It was a connection that would last a lifetime, a reminder of what truly mattered. Later that evening, Clara sat alone in her penthouse, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. She held Emma's letter close, reading it over and over. She thought about how a small, blind girl with nothing but words and hope had taught her to see the world differently, to see people not as numbers or opportunities, but as souls to be understood, cherished, and loved. Clara knew that life would continue to bring challenges, pressures, and decisions, but she felt ready. She had discovered a strength that no business deal, no bank balance, and no title could give her. She had learned to love, to care, and to connect in ways she had never imagined. And she owed it all to Emma, the small, brave girl who had asked, "Can you read this?" And yes, Clara could read it. She had read it with her eyes, her heart, and her soul, and she would carry the words, the lessons, and the love they shared forever. As Clara looked out over the city that night, she smiled through her tears. For the first time in her life, she felt whole.